Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's BU Professional Development webinar, How to Nail Your Next Interview. My name is Jeff Murphy, and I'm an Associate Director in the BU Alumni Relations Office, as well as a proud alumnus of the BU Questrom School of Business. Today's webinar is sponsored by the BU Alumni Relations Office and is offered to our 321,000 alumni around the globe. Throughout your career, BU is committed to helping you define and achieve your professional goals. We aim to do this by providing alumni with access to a series of valuable online tools and social media communities. It's important that we get your opinion on how we're doing, so we very much look forward to receiving your feedback via a survey that will be emailed to all of you later today. I know that we have alumni joining us from places far away like Mongolia, Abu Dhabi, British Columbia, Switzerland, Suzhou, China, Boulder, Colorado, Kissimmee, Florida, Cartersville, Georgia, Troy, Montana, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and of course, as always, dozens of Massachusetts alumni from towns like Beverly, Marshfield, Chelmsford, Hopedale, Taunton, Dennis, and more. For each and every one of you out there, please know that we really do value your opinion on this and every program that we offer. Before I introduce today's speaker, some brief housekeeping notes. As you know by now, this webinar is being hosted on the Adobe Connect online meeting platform. If you experience any trouble with the audio or visual portions of this presentation, I'll ask that you please contact Adobe Connect directly. You can reach them at 1-800-422-3623. Again, that number, if you want to jot it down, 1-800-422-3623. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be made available for on-demand viewing on the Alumni Association website found at www.bu.edu/alumni. Our speaker today is very eager to answer any questions you may have, and you're welcome to submit them throughout the presentation using the Q&A chat box you should see at the bottom of your screen. We hope to get to as many questions as we can during today's webinar. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the day. Presenting from up in Lowell, Mass. is School of Education alumna Kim Bilawchuk. Kim is committed to getting young professionals unstuck and finding the career of their dreams. If you're looking for a proven professional who can help you identify what you're good at and what interests you, create a plan to get where you want to be, and help you develop the skills and tools you need to achieve your success, you've come to the right place. With 20 years of corporate and academic counseling experience working with amazing clients with similar worries and concerns and guiding them to achieve remarkable success, her mission is to help everyone find their dream careers. Kim holds an MBA from Boston College. Her degree from BU is a Master's in Education and Counseling, and she also has a Bachelor's in Business Administration from UMass Amherst. Kim is a long-standing volunteer for the Alumni Association, has done several workshops for BU in the past, and I'm very thankful to have her with us here today. Kim, I'm going to go ahead and get your slide deck up and running, and then as soon as you see those, it might take a second, but the floor will be all yours.
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Kim Bilawchuk, as Jeff had said, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. And I want to thank you, Jeff, for inviting me to present to the Boston University alumni. And I want to congratulate all of you who've taken time out of your schedules to be with me here today. Since you've made it this far, I'd encourage you to really be here for the next hour. Shut down any other programs you have, silence your phone, grab a piece of paper and pen to jot down some notes. I know your time is valuable, and I promise to make this time worth your while today. Jeff is going to help me insert some polls during our call today to help keep you engaged. And like he said, I encourage you to jot any other questions you have in the Q&A box. And if I don't get to them during our formal part of our webinar today, then I'll certainly stick around afterwards to answer them for you. So let's get started here. Jeff did a great introduction already. Here's a photo of me, not today. It's snowing where I am here in New England. Maybe not even where Jeff is, but here anyway. I've been on both sides of the interview table for hundreds of interviews since, I'm going to say, the late 80s, early 90s. I started when I was really young. In my first professional job, I created and managed a growing college relations program where I helped managers learn how to best assess their candidates. And over time, I've created some really neat tools and resources that I'm going to share with you today to help you nail your interviews. I'm currently doing a job that I would define as my dream job. I launched my business as a career coach in 2008 after having started my professional career in corporate HR and ultimately working in higher education. I've worked in lots of different industries in financial services, high tech, higher education, financial services, high-tech retail, and social sales. And I have lots of education, as Jeff had mentioned also. So I'll list all those here for you. And my special Boston University in red. Um, so let's get started. I'd like to start with our first poll, Jeff, if we could, and get a sense for how many years of professional work experience our guests have today. So I've broken this into 0 to 2, so you may be a new or recent college grad, 2 to 10 years, 10 to 25, or 25 plus. So
Kim, are you
I'll
able to
let
see those
you,
answers coming in?
I am, thank you.
Okay, great.
So it looks like we have a pretty good mix across the board, right? I think that's about it, Jeff, or do you have any more?
No, that's great. Just as a reminder, don't use the Q&A box for this. You'll actually want to select the buttons for our future poll questions. But yeah, I'll go ahead and close that out. Looks like the top answer was 10 to 25, Kim.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right. So let's talk about what we're going to cover today. And like I said, I've done this for a really long time. I have lots and lots of information to share, but I only have about 45 minutes here today to give you some time for Q&A. So today we're going to cover 3 major steps to nail your interview. And I'm going to weave in lots of other information and some stories, but I hope you take away at least these 3 important nuggets of information. The first one is understanding what the purpose of an interview is. If you don't know why you're there, it's really hard to succeed, I think. So we'll talk about what that purpose is. And then we're going to talk about how to prepare for an interview. And step 3 is how do I follow up? And like I said, I will leave it open for Q&A toward the end of the call. And I have some special bonuses if you're able to hang on till the end of today's call as well. So I think self-confidence is a really important piece of your success. And so I found this quote from Arthur Ashe. He was an American professional tennis player. He won 3 Grand Slam titles, and including Wimbledon, the U.S. Open, the Australian Open. He's done lots of really great tennis playing. Now, you don't need to understand tennis to understand that this quote may resonate with you. So I'll read it to you. One important key to success is self-confidence. An important key to self-confidence is preparation. So one of the things that is going to help you feel more confident in being ready for your interviews is really knowing that you're applying for the right position, that you're prepared, and that you're going to give it your best shot. So I know that sometimes we interview for jobs that we don't think are really the right match, or they might be a stretch for our skills, but having the confidence that you're going to give this all you've got is really your most powerful tool. So let's do one more poll here and get a sense for how many interviews people have been on here. And again, click on your poll piece. So if not in the Q&A box. So if you could take a minute and let me know how many interviews you've been on. What's your experience? I said over 100, but do we have some new to the interviewing process? Looks like a pretty even split so far across the board. That looks good. So it looks like most of you have at least some interview experience. And looks like most of you are somewhere in that 5 to 25 range, maybe a few outliers in the 1 to 5, just getting started, and a few of you on the other end with 25 or more. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So let's move on to our first step here. What is the purpose of an interview? Why do we do this anyway? The interview is simply an exchange of information between you, the candidate, and the employer representing your potential employer. Both parties will share information about themselves with the intention of assessing a good fit or match between your skills and the needs of the employer. Although the employer will ask most of the questions, it's important for you to understand that you should also be assessing the organization to ensure it fits your needs as well. It's basically an exchange of information, a conversation to learn more about what you can offer a potential employer. That's it. We have conversations all the time, right? Now, clearly, the employer has a little bit more leverage here. They're in a position of power and can stop the interview process at any time and say, we're not interested. Thank you, but no thank you. But you also have that power to pull yourself out of the interview process if you decide that you're not a good fit for the employee for the corporation or organization that you are applying to. So it's important to remember that this is a two-way street. Before we talk about the purpose of an interview, it's important to understand where this fits in the whole job application process. So your resume is going to get you to the interview, and then your interview is going to get you to the job. Note that your resume here is not going to get you to the job. It's not that simple. You really need to have the interview in between. And again, it's just simply a tool to start the conversation or the exchange of information that I just mentioned. So here's a clue for you. If you're getting interviews, but you're not getting, that means your resume is working, right? Because the resume is getting you to the interview. If you, and maybe you have great networking skills, but that's a different webinar. If you're getting interviews but not job offers, then perhaps your interviewing skills might need some improvement, right? So you're getting in the door here, but you're not getting the job. So you may be interviewing for the wrong job, or maybe there's something that we can improve your interview process, and I hope to give you some tools and skills today to move that along. But I think this is a great visual to show that the resume isn't what gets you the job. It gets you in the door to talk about it, but not the job itself. Okay, so the purpose of the interview is a couple-fold, many-fold actually. It's to see you firsthand, right? And nowadays, most companies are offering either a phone conference or a video conference so that they're not spending a lot of time bringing you in and spending all the time and resources if you're not going to be a good fit. But they want to make sure that the things that you're putting on your resume are what you are, right? That you're able to back up the things that you've highlighted on your resume and give some more examples and be able to talk about them and present yourself in a professional way. So basically, they're looking for more detailed information about the candidate. They may also sell the job or the organization, and this is a really cool place for you to be. When you're in an interview and they stop asking you questions and they start telling you about how great the company is and how many things you can do here and how your job advancement can go, that's a clue that you've done a good job because now they're trying to sell you on the company. They want you to be able to find yourself a good fit there. And you'll also have an opportunity to ask questions about the employer. Remember, we talked about this two-way conversation, and this allows you to assess some of that information too. Now, this next slide is one of my favorite pieces, and if you don't take anything else away from today, this is one of the top pieces that I want you to think about. Employers are looking for three major pieces. Can you do the job? Do you have the basic skills, knowledge, abilities to do the job? And I said basic, right? I'm not looking for, if you're looking at an entry-level position, then they're not going to expect that you have 10 or more years of experience. They're going to want to see that you have the basic knowledge, skills, and abilities to do the job. They can teach you what you don't know, but they want to make sure that you have at least those basic pieces. Will you do the job? Are you motivated to do the job? Do you have the passion and the interest and the can-do attitude to do the job? There are a lot of things that we're good at in life, but not necessarily things that we want to do for a living. And I'll give you an example. I am really good at doing laundry. I can do it almost blindfolded. I'm doing it right now. In fact, there's always something going. But that doesn't mean that I would be motivated to do laundry for a living. I have a neighbor who is very good at doing laundry, high skill set, and she loves to do it. She's motivated and passionate to make sure that all her towels are neatly folded and put away. She works for a hotel where she does exactly that. And I think that's a great example and a really simple one, but something that I hope that you can relate to, right? So there are lots of things that you can do, but not necessarily things that you want to do. And that's an important distinction as you're looking for a job. And finally, fit. Are you somebody that has a good fit for the job, personality-wise? Do you mesh with the values of the organization? Are you a good cultural fit? Is this a kind of group of people that you'd want to hang out with if you're working on a project late? This is also the piece that's hardest to fake. You can say, yeah, I can do the job, and maybe I can tell you that I'm going to be, I'm going to fold my laundry, and I'm really going to be interested in that. But if I'm not a good fit for the culture of the company, if I don't really want to work for a hotel chain for whatever reason, that's a really hard piece for you to fake it. And if you do fake it during your interview process, then you're going to be stuck faking it every single day that you go to that job. So I want you to remember this as you think about, the components that employers are looking for. Can you do the job? Will you do the job? And are you a fit? So let's talk about step two. How do I prepare for an interview? This is really the most important step or phase, if you will. If you prepare and do all your work here, then the rest of it's really pretty simple. So here's some things you can do to prepare. Research the company, right? Basic kinds of things. You can look on LinkedIn, Glassdoor. You can contact your alumni association and find out who you might know who knows somebody that works there. Um, Network with anybody else that you can. Do a Google search. See how they come up in the news. There's so much access to information today, maybe too much access to information, that it's really easy to find out about the companies and what they're all about, what they're doing in the community, what they might not be doing in the community. A great way to prepare is to practice typical answers to typical interview questions. And I'm going to give you some tips today and a few more slides that will give you exactly what you need in order to be prepared in that way. Prepare your list of questions to ask. I'll give you some samples there that you can also take with you. You want to show that you're interested in the job, that you have some, that you're also interviewing them, right? That's that exchange of information. You want to print and bring extra copies of your resume. And I know this seems kind of crazy. We do so much electronically today that people should just have that copy of your resume at their fingertips. But how great are you going to look if you go into an interview and there's a snowstorm here in Boston today, so the person that was supposed to interview you didn't make it, and somebody else filled in. They said, I just got called to interview you. I don't really know anything about you. Do you have a copy of your resume? And you say, no. Wouldn't it be great if you could say, yeah, sure, here's a copy, right? It's super easy to provide that information for you. Makes you look like the professional. Know where you're going and how you're connecting. Make sure you have a phone number of someone that you're supposed to meet with in case you're sick, you get lost. Whatever's happening that's going to disconnect you from getting to where you need to be. And know where you're going. Where are you going to park? How are you going to get there? Is it public transportation? Are you walking? Are you going at a time where there's peak traffic that maybe you hadn't thought about and it's going to take you a little bit longer? So if you have a chance, practice. Take a dry run and see. Make sure you know exactly where you're going, because you would hate to walk in 10 minutes late and say, I got lost. I didn't really know where I was going. That's a simple piece that you can prepare for ahead of time. And finally, for this slide, be sure your clothes are in good repair, not the morning of your interview, but beforehand, and try everything on. Make sure all the buttons are, connected for you guys out there, and that your tie is neat and clean and not wrinkled. And ladies, make sure that you've got a professional business suit that looks appropriate for the job that you're interviewing for. So many times I've walked into interviews with candidates and it looks like they pulled something together last minute, and that's not exactly the impression that you want to be presenting. So typical interview structure, you introduce yourself to the person that you're interviewing with, or they introduce themselves to you. The interviewer asks questions, the interviewee asks questions, and then there's a closing and next steps. So really 4 basic, simple steps, nothing really complicated here. I want to talk about, again, a little bit about those first impressions, right? And so here's one of my, let's call him one of my interview candidates, and just take a second and think about what your initial reaction to him might be, and what you think he might do for a job, and where he might live, and what kind of job might he actually be interviewing for. First impressions are so critically important, and I'm guessing that it probably only took you, a couple seconds to make an impression or a judgment about who this person might be. And what if I told you this was exactly the same person? You only get one chance to make that first impression. And, so here, he's shaved and he's got a nice suit on, and clearly he could be interviewing for 2 very, very different jobs, but it really sets the tone for the rest of the interview. I worked for a company when I first finished my undergrad. It was a technology company. We had no dress code. And I worked with a hiring manager who only ever wore jeans. Good jeans on Monday, not so great ones by Friday, right? And even for our semi-formal, he wore tan jeans, not blue jeans, but tan ones. So But he would interview all of our new college grads. And one day we were having a meeting about the candidates we had met that week, and he said, "Yeah, no, I don't like that candidate." And I said, "Well, why not?" I said, "You know, he came from a great school. He interviewed really well." He said he didn't wear a suit. I said, "How can you say that? You, of all people, who doesn't even wear anything aside from jeans?" And he said, "Well, he gets one chance to make a first impression." And the first impression I got was that he didn't care enough to pull himself together for this interview to make that good first impression. Now, this goes back, 20 some odd years ago, and I know that the culture of many companies has changed. I worked for a financial services company that was basically blue suits like this gentleman on the right. And, I have friends that work there now and can wear jeans to work on any given day. So I know things have changed, but just think about what that first impression might be like. It really sets the tone for the whole interview. It'd be better to be overdressed than underdressed. Along those same lines, we're making a lot of communication just in our nonverbal behavior. So before you even open your mouth, look how much of this is impacting your communication style, right? Woody Allen says 80% of life is just showing up. Now, here it's not maybe 80%, but you're maybe, I don't know, two-thirds, 66 and some change, right? But think about the things that are being communicated nonverbally. Things we've talked about already: punctuality, your professional clothing, your grooming, a firm handshake, so, so important, right? You want to connect sort of web to web in your hands, like that web piece between your finger and your thumb. I can't really demonstrate that here, but you get the idea, right? Really firm handshake. Eye contact. Look at the person that you're talking to. Stand up straight. Put a smile on your face, right? And this is a great test anywhere you are. Just smile and see how people respond to you. It's so much more positive than if you walked in slouched over, grumpy, late, right? So those are all things that are within your control. Obviously, the verbal communication is really important too. Your ability to carry on a conversation, to listen, the grammar and word usage that you use, the likes, the ums, the ahs. And I'm guilty of some of that too, but try to make a conscious effort around that. If your voice sounds confident and self-assured, that's how you're going to come across. My band director in high school used to say, if you looked good, you'd sound good. And if you sound good, you must really be good. So, think about that confidence that you project just by having that tone of confidence in your voice. There's a great TED Talk by a woman named Ann Cuddy out of Harvard University, and she talks about the Wonder Woman pose. And I can share a link with Jeff to share with you later. I didn't include it here, but it's about 20 minutes, and she talks about the importance of confidence and how if you stand in a really confident way, it actually boosts all these things chemically in your body to help you feel more confident. Super easy. You can all stand like Wonder Woman, right? Hands on your hips, feet, sturdy and head strong, and a good smile on your face. You got this. Super easy. Okay, so like I said earlier, your resume is going to get you to the interview. And now that you've arrived here, employers are going to want to know a whole bunch of things about you. They're going to want to know about your experiences, your accomplishments, your skills, your goals, your values, your strengths, your weaknesses. How can you possibly prepare for all of this information? I want to look at some specific questions, and maybe before I do that, Jeff, if you could pop up that last poll for me, what interview question it is that you fear the most. I'm going to talk about all of these today, but I want to make sure that I cover the ones that you're interested in. Strengths and weaknesses. People hate that question. Tell me about yourself. That is my favorite question, and I'll tell you why. Why do you want this job? You should totally know why you want this job. Yeah, I think strengths and weaknesses is winning by a country mile, right? um, yeah, for sure. Tell me about yourself. Not a lot of concern about the illegal questions. I'll touch briefly on those. Oh, looks like people are changing their answers. That's okay. All right, strengths and weaknesses it is. Looks like our winner. What do you think, Jeff? Awesome. Okay, so we'll definitely talk about strengths and weaknesses. Like I said, we're going to talk about all of these, so let's take a closer look at each of these. So here's some basic types of questions. Conventional, traditional questions we'll talk about in a second. Some out of left field questions. I'll describe what all of these are. Some open and closed-ended questions. And finally, we're going to talk about behavioral questions. In my mind, this is kind of the This is kind of the secret sauce, and with a good answer to a behavioral question, you can answer virtually every one of them. And hang on, and I will show you how to do that. So first, just quickly about legal and illegal questions. All questions must be job related. And I've given you some samples here. Questions must not be asked with the intent to discriminate. Most interviewers don't intentionally choose questions that are going to discriminate against you in any way, shape, or form. But I just wanted you to be aware that you are in a protected class if they're interviewing you and asking you questions, if you think with the intent to discriminate on any of this basis. So how do you answer that question? Let's say, for example, you get asked an illegal question like, how old are you? It doesn't matter for most jobs now in some cases it could be a valid, you need to be a certain age. But let's say they come back and say, how old are you? You have three choices in terms of how to answer that. You can answer it the way it's asked. I'm 25 years old. You can answer it the way it may have been intended to be asked legally, right? The way that they might have said it is, are you over the age of 18? Because that's the minimum age for this job. So you could say, instead of saying I'm 25, you could say I am over the age of 18, which is the minimum age for this job. Or you could refuse to answer it, and you could do that as nicely or as not nicely as you want. But you could say, I believe that's an illegal question. Could you ask me another one? My brother was interviewing for a job as he was graduating from college, and he was having, kind of the time of his life. And the interviewer said, so when do you plan to get married and have kids? Now, my brother's only priority really was finding a job so that he could support his partying habit at that point. So really way far out of the realm for him. So he just said, I don't know, and moved on. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. If you have questions, we can talk about them later. But I just wanted you to be aware that most people don't ask questions with the intent to discriminate. All right, so here's some traditional questions, right? Why should we hire you? You should know that. Why are you a good fit for this organization? You've done all that research. You've done all kinds of information gathering, maybe talked to some people that have gone to have worked at the company, currently work at the company, used to work at the company, something like that. So you should have a pretty good idea of why you should be at that job interview. How did you choose your major or your college? And clearly the longer you've been out of undergrad or even graduate school, the less likely this is going to be the case. But you should have a good story. Why did I choose to go to UMass Amherst? I've got a really good story I can share with you, and why I chose to go to BU and BC for the degrees that I have. You should understand, how to do that. What are your career goals? Now, this is kind of a tricky question. But if you think about what, and what employers are looking for is, how is this job a logical next step for you in your career path? So let's say, for example, I'm working with a client right now who is a coach for a sporting team on a college campus. And he just took a part-time job to sort of help balance out some things that were going on, selling fireplaces. Now, a fair question for the company selling fireplaces might be, why are you interested in this job? How does this fit with being a sports coach, right? So think about how that next step makes sense and make it a clear path. I'm taking this job because it's going to help give me some skills and I can develop these pieces and I can provide this for you. And then it's ultimately going to get me someplace else I want to be. Tell me about yourself. I said this was my absolute favorite question. Carte blanche. You can do whatever you want here and tell them, whatever it is that you want about your background, your experiences, your skills. Now, for some people, that's really paralyzing. And I'm going to come back to hold this a little bit and come back to this when we talk about behavioral questions. Because I'm going to give you a template that you can use to answer most of these questions about why it is that they should hire you. Tell me about yourself, right? So here, in most cases, it's not, I was born on a farm in Iowa, but, here's some things that I'm really interested in, and here's why I'm interested in this company. So you can turn it around and give them exactly the kinds of questions the answers that they want for the questions that they're asking. And then finally, that dreaded, what are your strengths and weaknesses question? And I'm going to come back to this too, because I think once you understand what your strengths are and what you can talk about in terms of accomplishments, then that makes that really easy. The weaknesses questions people get a little bit, and I'm guessing I didn't separate those out as in the poll, but I'm guessing the weakness question is a little bit more of a challenge. And it's okay. We all have weaknesses. I have weaknesses. Jeff has weaknesses. We all have weaknesses. And the idea is to understand what it is that they are for you and how you're working to overcome them. Now, for me, one of my pieces is that I leave things till the last minute, right? Jeff asked me to get this presentation to him yesterday, and I thought, oh, that's really early for me. I would normally be putting this together until just before I went online. So thank you, Jeff, for getting me to do that early. And I did it. It was fine, right? So that was one of the things that I sometimes need to put in deadlines for myself to get them there on time. So what is it for you that, you can show as you don't want to say, I'm always late. Well, if you're always late, figure out how to get on time, right? I had an employee who worked for me once, and he was always late. He came, consistently 5 to 10 minutes late. Why are you late? Oh, there was traffic. There was a train going across the crossway. I slept late. I couldn't find a clean shirt. None of those are my problems. You need to figure out how to make that work, right? So would that be a good weakness for him to describe? No. Unless he could say, you know what, I'm generally really late. So what I do is I set my alarm early, half an hour, so I can get here early, and then I can walk around the parking lot and get a little bit of fresh air before I get into the office in the morning, right? So just turn it around and make it into a positive. I put this out of left field questions on here just because I think people are still asking them, and it baffles me, but I think that it's happening. I'm hearing it from lots of my clients that they're still getting crazy questions. So if you could be any superhero, who would you be? If you could have dinner with any historical or professional athlete or whoever, who would it be? If you were a vegetable, what would you be? Why do people ask these questions? I don't know. You should have some sort of answer for them, but I wouldn't spend a lot of time here. I think personally that people ask these questions because they got asked these questions at some point in their life, and they're looking for a little bit like, I got asked this question, I'm going to ask it too. Open and closed-ended questions. Closed-ended questions are those that can be answered with a yes or no or a one-word response. Open-ended questions require more description. Even if you're asked a closed-ended question, turn it around and elaborate. Answer why or how, right? Where did you go to school? Boston University. Why? Oh, I chose BU because da 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 da, right? When did you graduate? Some of those you can, they're confirming things that might be on your resume already. Tell me about yourself. How long have you been out of work? Well, you can see from my resume I've been out of work for 3 weeks or 3 years or 3 months or whatever it might be. All right, so here's my favorite part here, right? Kind of the magic, I call it my secret sauce to the whole interview process. Behavioral questions are based on the fact that the best predictor of future performance is past performance. We're not talking hypotheticals here, right? If I put you in a group, a team to solve this problem, what would you do? I don't know. How are the people? What's the project? What's my timeline? Do I have a budget? There's a million questions that you could ask. Let me change it around and say, give me an example of the last time you worked as part of a team to implement a process or work on a project or whatever it might be, right? So the idea is that if you behaved in a certain way before, you're likely to behave that way again. So what? What does that mean for us? It means that we've got a really structured template to figure out how to answer these questions. So I was telling Jeff earlier, I was trying to come up with an acronym that was really cool, and I spelt it wrong, basically. So I'm just calling this my magical piece here. So the first thing you want to describe when you're answering your behavioral question is the situation or the problem. Describe the task or the project. What was your role? What was the objective? What were you working on here? Set the stage, right? People love stories, by the way, right? I've sprinkled some in today. I've got lots more that I could tell you. But you're going to remember those stories. You're going to remember the story about the laundry. You're going to remember the story about the guy who wore jeans, and didn't want his interview candidates to do it, much more than you're going to remember all the other technical stuff that I'm showing on my slides today. So describe that situation. Paint the picture of what it looked like there. What was the action? What did you do? Can you be specific? Can you show your strengths here? Or maybe your weaknesses and the things that you've overcome? Be as descriptive as you can and explaining that and again painting that picture. What was the outcome or the result? What happened? Did it work? Did it not work? Was it a disaster? Was it a success? Did we think it was not going to work, but it was, we had this happy surprise that made it happen and work really well? So we use that as a model for other parts of the company going forward. What are the ways that you can describe that? And finally, reflect on what you learned. If you were in that situation again, what would you do differently? What would you do the same? Are there different tools or resources that you had to learn that you could use to implement a new process or work on a new project? So you can see here, I was working with my acronym here. I had SAOR. I wanted it to be SOAR. The good news is that the word SAOR is actually a word in Gaelic that means free. It's also a band in Scotland. Just a little extra trivia for you today. You probably realize that, but it's not spelt right. So I want you to think about this: situation, action, outcome, reflection. If anybody has another acronym that they want to pull together, I'm all ears. I'm happy to listen. So let's look at some sample behavioral questions. Describe a situation when you disagreed with a supervisor, customer, coworker. Give me an example of when you offered extraordinary customer service. Internally, externally, it could be either one. When have you felt a great deal of pressure and how did you deal with it? And finally, tell me about a situation where you worked as part of a team. And this could be anything. And one of my favorite questions, when I asked this a lot of the candidates that I interviewed, and people would always tell me about these great, teams that they worked on and, how everything was perfect and wonderful and worked out well. And I said, that's great. But I bet if I asked all of you on this webinar today to think about a time where you worked as a part of a team that was a struggle, a challenge, a nightmare, something that you couldn't wait to get done, I bet almost every single one of you would raise your hand. I know I've been on teams that were crazy. And it could be a project team as an undergrad. It could be something at work. It could be a community project that you're working on, a volunteer organization that you're part of. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be a paid experience. You can describe any of these things, excuse me, whether they're paid or unpaid experiences. So I put together this magic interview template for you, and I will, if you hang on to the end, I'll give you a place that you can download this for yourself so you can literally fill in the blanks and take this with you. If you can put together, let's say 2 or 3 of these, you can answer almost any interview question that you can imagine. So I filled one in for you, and I kept this purposely simple so that you could all relate to it, because I know you're all coming from different backgrounds. So let's say that I get asked a question like, describe a situation where you had to plan an event. Now, not everybody's job is going to require that, but just, hold on with me for a second. So my situation, I planned a surprise birthday party for my sister at her favorite restaurant. My parents and her best friend helped me too. That's the situation, right? So I set the stage. Maybe I could have said my sister's turning 30 or 40 or 50. It doesn't matter, right? I'm just planning this party. What was the action? I contacted the restaurant to make the reservation at her, favorite place. I ordered the cake. I designed the invitations to mail to her friends and family. What was the outcome? My sister was surprised that we all took the time to celebrate her birthday. We all kept a great secret. In reflection, we forgot to ask guests to make a donation to my sister's favorite charity instead of bringing gifts. If I were to plan something like this again, I'd make sure to include that on the invitation. Now, again, this is a super simple template and a super simple example, but I wanted it to be simple to show you just how easy it could be. I always have my clients put this together for them, and so sometimes it could be, something that's working well on your job, something that you're particularly proud of. It could be someplace where you've been asked to take on some additional responsibility. It could be any number of things. I'm working with a client right now, and he wanted a list of questions that he could prepare answers for. And I said, just hold on, I'm going to give you this template, and you could use this for virtually any interview question. And he said, no, I just want a list of questions. I said, I don't want to, I don't think you need to go and, fill out different answers for 30 different questions. But if we go back and use this example, can I list this as a strength or a weakness question? What about a tell me about yourself? That I want to show something I'm really proud of. What about those other questions that I asked, right? Part of a team. Maybe extraordinary customer service. Well, maybe you could stretch it. Maybe the customer service is for your sister. Now, I'm not always encouraging you to use personal examples like this, but think about, what other kinds of things you could fill in your magic interview template that would allow you to do this too. All right, so the next stage of this is questions to ask the interviewer, right? And if we think about that circle, they get to ask questions. Now you get to ask questions. So I want you to think about what those questions might be. You need to be prepared with them, right? It shows you're interested, that you're intelligent, that you're thoughtful, that you've done your homework on the company or the industry, the job function, the career path, any of those kinds of things. Prepare at least 2 to 3 good questions about what those might be. So I've listed a couple of them for you here. Why do you like working here? What do you think makes someone successful in this role or company? And I have one more. I think I fell off here, but I would add something like, why is this job open? Is it a growth position? Have the last 3 people left because they don't get along with the culture? What are the things that you want to be able to ask? And you could ask these same questions for anybody that you meet with. So if you meet 3 or 4 people from the company, you can ask all of them the same questions. That's totally okay. Questions not to ask. How much does this position pay? You'll get there when it's time. You'll figure that out. What are the benefits of working here? They'll tell you that when they're ready too. How much vacation do I get? It's not about the vacation. It's about working. And obviously no other questions about anything that you can easily find on their web page or, website or other material that they have. All right, and then in closing, I think this is one of the best things you can say. I would love to have this job. If you are genuinely interested in this job, this goes back to that, can do, will do, fit, right? If you really want this job, then this is a great way for you to think about, what it is that you want to tell them, right? I want this job. I interviewed a candidate once, and he did not have the skills that he needed to have. He didn't have the can do part. He was totally a good fit for the organization, got along with everybody that he interviewed with, and his will do, his passion was over the top. He was so excited to learn whatever he didn't learn, whatever he didn't know already, that we ended up hiring him. We taught him the pieces that he didn't know, but he was such a good fit and such a good motivated candidate that it was worth having. But he told everybody that he interviewed with, I would love to have this job. And he said, I know I don't have the skills that everybody else has, but I really want this and I'm going to work really hard. So try that. If you really want it, go for it. If you don't, then don't. Don't say it. What are the next steps in the interview process? Absolutely fine. We're interviewing more candidates through next week, or you're the last candidate. We'll make a decision after today, or we aren't going to make any decisions, for 3 months, whatever it is. You should know what that is. Ask any final questions and ask for some contact information so that you can write a thank you note. Just a quick tip on phone and video interviews. Make sure that you're in a quiet place to reduce the chances of interruptions. Allow for plenty of time, even more than what they suggest that you might need there. They say 20 minutes, keep it for, 30 minutes or something like that, right? That you want to make sure that you've got some extra time. Super easy to have your notes and a copy of your resume in front of you, and they can't see that you're, have notes in front of you about your magic interview template, right? That you're actually kind of reading through that and using that as a crutch. I don't need to know. It's perfect. If you happen to be on a video, you can be creative with the way that you put them around your screen or around the webcam so you can kind of glance off to the side and get your notes if you need to. All right, so here's where you can get your checklist and template. You can download your copy here. I've got a couple more pieces of content, and then I'll open it up for Q&A, but here you go, kbcareercoach.com/nail-your-interview, and you'll get your own copy of that with a checklist of most of the things that I've talked about today. All right, so finally, step 3, how do I follow up? Do you know that so few people actually follow up after an interview, that if you do follow up, even if you write a so-so or a not so great thank you note, that you actually look good. You'll stand out in a good way. So write a thank you note as soon as you can afterwards. Restate your strengths and enthusiasm, your passion, maybe anything that you forgot to address in the interview. Typed or handwritten is okay as long as you can read your handwriting. Follow the steps recommended by the interviewer and stay in touch, right? I have a client right now who's been working with an organization that he really wants to work with for probably like 3 or 4 months. And they keep telling him, keep in touch, send me a note in a week, send me a note in 2 weeks, we'll follow up after the holidays. And he keeps doing exactly what they tell him. And the position's not quite open yet, but we're keeping our fingers crossed. Learn from your experience. Make some notes after your interview to remember what went well or what you might want to do differently the next time. Jot down the questions you were asked, the way that you answered them, the way that you think you might have done them differently, reactions that you got if people weren't clear about how you answered your questions. Could you improve upon it to make that story a little clearer for next? So to review, we've covered a lot of territory in the last 45 minutes, but what is the purpose of an interview? Hopefully you know that now, right? Can you do the job? Will you do the job? And are you a fit? That's why they want to know why you're here, right? That all of the pieces that you put on your resume are accurate representations of who you are. How do I prepare? We talked about my magic interview template and really thinking about those key experiences that you have that you want to share with a potential employer. And finally, how to follow up, how to look better than most of the other candidates out there that don't follow up, and obviously to reflect on your answers. So at this time, I would love to know, and maybe we can combine this. I know we're kind of running out of time, but if you want to start putting any questions in your Q&A box about what you've learned today or what questions you have, just a few final interview tips to be yourself. You want to make sure that you're presenting yourself in a way that is comfortable for the organization and for you. You don't want to pretend you're someone else and have them hire that someone that you're pretending to be. Be well rested. It's better off to get a good night's sleep than to be 100% prepared, but you're going to be 100% prepared anyway because of all the things we've talked about today. Learn from every interview. How can you make the next one better? And have fun. They're all, just an opportunity for you to explore some new opportunities, right? And sometimes we get really excited about a job. We think it's a perfect company. We get in there and it's not. So how can you make that better? Finally, we talked about confidence at the beginning. I just wanted to wrap up with that again. Our confidence comes from our preparation. This is a soccer player from Brazil, and this is his quote, right? So our confidence comes from our preparation. So prepare, practice, practice, practice. Find a buddy, say it out loud. It doesn't count to just write it down. You need to be able to say things out loud. So with that, I invite you to connect with me via email, on my website, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and let me know how I can help you moving forward. So any questions, Jeff, for me?
And we actually have a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to go back to this previous slide so that people can remember how to get in touch with you. I am also going to put up this web link. Folks, this should, if you click on the link here, this should take you directly to that interview checklist that Kim mentioned. I know we have about a dozen people who are dialing in on a mobile device. I know this does not work on iPads. I don't know if it's going to work on other platforms, but here again is the link. People are asking how they can stay in touch with you, Kim. Let me just move some things around here.
Great.
Sorry. Lots of people asking about whether or not you're going to share a copy of these slides. I know you don't plan to share these slides, but again, people interested in getting some kind of information about a brief overview of what you covered today should follow up with you at the means you've listed above, and definitely click on that link for that Nail Your Interview checklist, right? Would that be best for you?
Yeah, so on the back of that checklist, when you download it, I put on the back of the interview template, rather, there's a checklist, and I've included a lot of the things that are on my slides. So things like the can do, will do fit, and I tried to pull the, kind of the big picture pieces of that. So, if I will also, if you sign up for that checklist, I will send you a follow-up email that will give you some access to some additional information I have about interviews that I will share with you. So that's your best way to keep in touch. Did that answer questions, do you think?
Sure. And then also people are asking, as a reminder, we did record this presentation and I will put it up on the BU Alumni Association website. We actually, it takes us a week to two as we actually put it up with a transcription, a TTY transcription for the hearing impaired. So it won't be up immediately, but it will be available for download. We have a ton of questions here, Kim. I am just trying to take a look through them and see which ones I think are most relevant for the topic. Let's see here. We're definitely not going to get to all of these. Thank you everybody for chatting in. My friend Stanley has asked a question. Any thoughts on personality profile questions? I applied for a position recently and was asked to answer a series of questions such as, I often lose my temper at work. The answers range from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Some of the questions were repeated at random. So Kim, any thoughts on those sort of personality profile questions you might be asked as a part of an interview process?
Ooh, that's a good question. You know, there are lots of companies that use personality profiles. I use some of them for my clients too to help them understand their personality. There's probably some reason that they're using it to help screen candidates at some level. I would be the best person that you can be, right? And if it's a fit, it's a fit, and if it's not, it's not. And I know that sounds sort of blunt, but in the end, do you want to work for a company that's going to assess you because you answered a question, truthfully to you? And it goes back kind of to that fit, right? So it depends what they're going to do with that information. I do know that a lot of the larger companies do that and helps them, assess what kinds of jobs you might be a good fit for and that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. I would just be honest. I think that's your best policy, and just be true to you and try not to overthink it. Because I think if you overthink it, then, especially if they're duplicating questions through the course of the assessment, then they're looking for something, and it's I don't know what they're looking for. You might never know either. They might not even know. They might just get a result at the end. So I would be yourself and try not to put too much energy into worrying about it.
Okay. Elise has asked a great question that I think is also sort of a two-parter here, if we can try to do both. What do you do when you're asked a direct question about a particular skill or experience set that you do not have? Or how do you answer a question in an interview when you really don't have an answer?
hmm Well, if you work on this template, you're going to have an answer, right? You can tweak and modify those experiences that you fill in that template to almost any interview question. And I've used this with so many clients of mine, and they go into an interview with basically three answers, right? I have them fill out three of these, and we talk about it and we practice it, and they think there's no way I'm going to, figure this out. And they come back and they say, wow, that was amazing. I can't believe that I was able to use those three examples for virtually every question I get asked. Now, there are some skills, right? If you're in a technical environment and they say, do you have, can you program in C, and you can't, you can say, I'm not going to, I would never encourage you to lie and say that you have a skill that you don't. I would say, I haven't had experience in that area, but let me give you an example of another software program that I'm really good at. And I know that if I know one, I'm able to, know, learn another one really quickly. So I would use, again, turn those weaknesses into a strength. There's some, if you've made it to an interview, then there's something on your resume that they're interested in you. And so if there's something that you don't have, it's maybe something that you can obtain or learn or read about or take a class on or something like that and figure it out. But there's something else there that they like about you, or you wouldn't have made it to the interview. So I guess I'm saying, like, don't worry about it too much.
Um, Carmen had asked for some clarification. Earlier on in your presentation, you sort of asked the question about that you might get about when did you graduate? And so Carmen's curious, isn't that an example of an illegal question to ask?
Yeah, actually it is. They don't need to know the year that you graduated. That's not important. You could say I have finished my, MBA, or I finished my undergrad degree at Boston University. They don't need to know when that was. And you could say I have, years of experience. A lot of people go back. Not everybody is a traditional aged student. I don't even know if that term exists anymore, but lots of people decide to go back and get bachelor's degrees after they've been working for a number of years. It doesn't matter. So, um, I don't know that I would necessarily classify that as an illegal question, but it gets at your age, which is an illegal question. So I would just say, yes, I have that degree and I have this experience.
Kim, we're getting a lot of questions actually about the kind of services that you offer. We're not going to get into those, but I definitely want to encourage folks to follow up with Kim at the means that she's listed up here, certainly by email and visiting her website. Um, I'm going to ask Michael's question because I think it's an interesting take on something that's happening more and more, at least in my experience, is the video interviews. And Kim, you touched on this briefly. More and more companies are starting opening rounds with Skype videos, that kind of thing. So, Michael, I'm going to change your question a little bit, but and Kim, I think I know what your answer is going to be. But should your attire for a video interview change from what you would wear in person?
I don't think so. I would be again, you'd rather be more dressed than less dressed, right? And if, you don't want to look like you just rolled out of bed. So I would treat it as a professional interview. Absolutely.
Right. I was kind of thinking that's where you were going to go, but I did think it was an important thing
Yeah,
to
and with
highlight.
that, I would just make yeah, I with that I would just make sure that, turn your webcam on and see what's behind you. Are there things on the wall that you don't want to be publicizing to a potential employer? Do you have a cat that's going to walk across the back of your chair while you're talking? How can you make that environment as plain as possible? Hang up a blank sheet if you need to behind you, right? Or cover your bookcase or whatever is behind you, and make sure your lighting is good so that you can present that in the best possible way. We all have really great, most of us have really great cameras on our even on our phones. So you don't need any fancy equipment, and they're not looking for fancy equipment. They're looking for communication skills, clarity of content, and presentation. Right? They want to make sure if you're interviewing for a sales job that you're presenting yourself in a professional way.
Um, Also, sort of an interesting clarification point from Yihong. I apologize if I'm not saying your name correctly. You've asked your interviewers some great questions at the end. What kind of comments would you make, if somebody answered your question that you asked an interviewer, um, what do you have a strategy for the best way to sort of respond to their answer, whether you agree with it, whether you don't agree with it? What advice do you have about that?
Let me make sure I understand the question. So at the end of the interview, I ask the interviewer a question, and then how do I respond to their answer?
Exactly.
Yeah. Sometimes it creates a discussion. You might not have a lot of time for questions at the end. So I would, it depends. If they, I don't know, let's use this as an example. Why is this position open? This is a new position. We're growing the company. Wow, that's great. I'd really like to be part of that growth. I think you can just sort of acknowledge it. I don't know that it needs a response necessarily. Kind of, I guess it
Yeah.
depends on the question. Why do you like to work here? I love to work at BU because I get to, walk along the Charles River every day and take my lunch outside when it's not snowing, or what, just talk about stuff that helps you relate to the job. So I don't know that it necessarily needs a follow up.
Sure. We're going to take one last question as we're running up against the hour. Again, thank you everybody for your wonderful questions. It's overwhelming the number that we got, and I encourage you all to follow up with Kim directly. Kim, does any of your advice change for people who've been out of the job market for a very long time? Somebody who left work to raise a family who's coming back in after an extended break from work. Does any of your advice change for those people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I work with a lot of clients that are coming back to work, or, moms and dads that are sort of shifting their focus in the world of work as they are working with their families too. And, I've got two little ones, and I always, share with people that it's a lot of work and you're doing a lot, and we tend to minimize what we do. But and I know there have been all these studies on this, right? People had to pay me for all the work, laundry, cooking, cleaning, making sure everybody's clothes fit, homework was done. Like that's a really good project manager. If you can do all that stuff, and we can talk about how to put that in a way that makes sense. Maybe you're volunteering for the PTO and coordinating some fundraisers, or it kind of depends what kind of job you want to go back into as well. But there are usually ways that you can figure out how to best describe that situation. And in reality, companies are starting to figure out that moms who work even part-time outside the home are so much more efficient. We just don't have time to fool around, right? You got to get done what you can get done in the time you have it. So a lot of companies are finding that, working moms are really valuable resources, and working dads too. So I don't know. I don't think my advice changes all that much. You still have to prepare and get ready and understand what they're looking for. And so it's really just in putting your story together and deciding what you want to present going forward, how you want to describe what you've done for the last, period of time, caring for parents or kids or whatever.
Well, Kim, thank you so much for taking the time to do this for us today. Obviously, with so many questions, I think you gave us a great foundation upon which to think about, particularly the preparation for an interview. Obviously, I took that home as being a central point that you were trying to make, and you gave people some great tips on how to do that. So thank you again so much for your time today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. And again, I would encourage you to follow up with me. If you download the template, then I will have your contact information so I can follow up with you. I'll send you some more information about the kinds of ways that I work with my clients, one-on-one, small groups, special in a day, VIP days, all kinds of ways that we can continue to stay in touch. So, Jeff, thank you again for the opportunity, and
Sure.
I'm happy to be here.
No, that's great. And then not to put you on the spot here, but don't we also have you confirmed for an event coming up in March? Are you able to do that for us?
Yes, yes. And I think
Perfect.
that's live. That's not, and it's in
Exactly.
Boston. You probably know more about it than I do.
Yeah, so
It's on
those
my
folks
calendar.
that are in the Boston area, we're going to have a great event coming up in March. It's actually going to be March 15th, Wednesday, March 15th in downtown Boston. We've got a panel event coming up called The Art of the Detour, and Kim and some other great alumni are going to be our panelists talking about making big career changes, drastic forks in the road, that sort of thing. So for those of you who are somewhat local to Boston, great opportunity to come and meet Kim in person. In addition to thanking Kim, I want to thank all of our guests for joining us today. I particularly want to thank all of our donors who've donated to BU in the past. We literally wouldn't be able to put on programs like this without your support. So thank you again. And as I mentioned, we've got an incredible lineup of events coming up in March. We're actually going to be launching Alumni Career Weeks 2017 with more than 30 career-related events taking place online and in cities around the globe. I encourage you to check out the full list of events that we're going to be doing on our website at bu.edu/alumni/career weeks. And as always, if you or any BU alumni you know would be interested in presenting a professional development webinar or have a topic that you'd like to showcase for the BU Alumni Association, feel free to contact me at the Alumni Relations Office or by email at jtmurphy@bu.edu. Thank you everybody for your time. Have a great day or a great evening wherever you might be.